The wolf should never have survived. By the time dawn painted the frozen mountains with pale silver light, the lake had already become a tomb. Thick sheets of broken ice covered the dark water, and the snow that had fallen through the night had buried every trace of the violent storm that had shattered the northern cliffs. Yet beneath that silent white surface, something still struggled.
Good morning to you both.
A pair
Fine
of
day,
silver
isn't it?
eyes stared upward through the ice, refusing to close. Miles away, in villages tucked between pine forests and frozen rivers, people spoke of ordinary things. They worried about empty grain stores, broken fences, and another winter that seemed determined to outlast hope itself. No one knew that before the sun climbed above the frost-crowned mountains, a single act of kindness would awaken a forgotten promise. No one knew that the wolves would abandon the forest together before nightfall. No one knew an orphan girl, whose name had never been spoken beyond her tiny village, was about to change the fate of an entire kingdom. And it would all begin with one desperate hand reaching beneath the ice. Winter ruled the northern frontier without mercy. Every morning arrived wrapped in silence, broken only by the whisper of snow drifting through endless rows of towering pines. Smoke curled from the stone chimneys of scattered cottages, rising slowly into a sky the color of cold iron. The people of Ashen Hollow had long ago learned that survival depended on patience. They repaired roofs before storms arrived, stored food while the earth still breathed beneath summer grass, and never wandered too deeply into the ancient forest where old stories refused to die. Children grew up hearing those stories beside warm fireplaces. They spoke of wolves larger than horses, kings who wore no crowns, guardians who watched over mountains older than memory itself. Most villagers laughed politely before adding another log to the fire. Legends were comforting during long winters. Reality demanded work. Before sunrise each morning, while most homes still slept beneath heavy blankets, a young woman quietly stepped into the frozen world carrying 2 wooden buckets balanced across her shoulders. Her name was Elara. She owned little beyond a small wooden cottage inherited from her parents after fever had stolen them many winters ago. The roof leaked whenever spring rains arrived. The windows rattled whenever northern winds crossed the valley. The tiny garden beside the house produced just enough vegetables to carry her through warmer seasons before snow buried everything beneath white silence. Life had never been generous to her. Yet neither had it hardened her heart. The first thing she did every morning was leave a handful of grain upon the fence for hungry birds. The second was to check on old Brenna, whose failing legs no longer allowed her to gather firewood alone. By afternoon she often wandered the hills collecting herbs for the village healer or helping children search for lost sheep that had wandered into the woods. She never expected payment. Most people thanked her. Some forgot. She never seemed to notice the difference. Kindness had become as natural as breathing. The villagers often shook their heads with quiet amusement. That girl would probably apologize to a thorn bush after it scratched her, the blacksmith once joked. The baker laughed. Even Elara smiled. Perhaps there was truth in it. That morning the cold bit harder than usual. Every breath became a cloud that drifted away like fading smoke. The snow beneath her boots groaned softly as she followed the narrow path toward Mirror Lake, where the village gathered fresh water even during the harshest months. The lake earned its name during summer. Its surface reflected mountains so perfectly they appeared to float upside down. But winter transformed it into something entirely different. A vast sheet of pale crystal stretched across the valley, surrounded by towering pines whose branches bowed beneath heavy blankets of snow. The world looked untouched. Peaceful. Almost sacred. Elara knelt beside a place villagers had carefully kept open by breaking the ice each day. She filled both buckets. The freezing water numbed her fingers within moments. She wrapped them inside her sleeves before beginning the walk home. Halfway across the shoreline, she stopped. A sound. So faint she wondered whether it had been carried by the wind. Scratch. Scratch. Then silence. She looked around. Nothing moved. Only snowflakes drifted lazily through the morning air. A raven called somewhere beyond the trees. Again. Scratch. This time she turned toward the center of the frozen lake. The sound came from beneath the ice. Her heartbeat slowed. Stories filled her thoughts. The old fisherman often warned children never to investigate strange noises beneath frozen lakes. The mountains kept secrets. Some should remain buried. Ilara stood perfectly still. The scratching came again. Weaker now. Almost gone. She stared across the smooth white surface until something caught her eye. Not movement. A shadow. Deep beneath layers of cloudy ice. Large. Far too large to belong to any fish. Reason urged her to leave. The buckets in her hands suddenly felt heavier than stone. If the ice broke, no one would hear her cry for help. If some wild creature waited beneath it. She took one cautious step backward. Then another. The scratching stopped. Silence settled across the lake once more. She closed her eyes. For one brief moment she almost walked away. Almost. Instead she slowly placed both buckets upon the snow. "I'll only look," she whispered to herself. The words disappeared into the cold air. Carefully she stepped onto the frozen lake. The ice answered with a low groan. Every instinct warned her to return. Each step carried her farther from safety, closer to the shadow waiting beneath her feet. When she reached the place where the sound had come from, she knelt carefully. The snow covering the ice was thicker here. She brushed it away using trembling gloves. Clear blue ice emerged beneath her fingers. Then she saw them. Eyes. Silver. Bright despite the darkness below. They were watching her. Not with anger. Not with hunger. With desperate determination. Ilara gasped. The enormous wolf lay trapped beneath collapsed slabs of frozen stone that had crashed into the lake during the previous night's storm. One powerful foreleg remained pinned beneath the shattered ice. Small streams of bubbles escaped its mouth with every weakening breath. Blood drifted slowly through the black water like ribbons of crimson silk. The creature should already have been dead. Yet somehow it still fought to breathe. Its thick silver fur shimmered beneath the frozen surface. Its body dwarfed any wolf Ilara had ever imagined. This was no ordinary animal. Even trapped, it carried the quiet dignity of something ancient. Something born long before villages claimed these valleys. Their eyes met. The wolf did not thrash. It did not bare its teeth. Instead, it held her gaze. There was pain within those silver eyes. Pain. And trust. As though, against all reason, it believed she had come. Ilara's breathing became uneven. "What happened to you?" she whispered. The wolf blinked once. Slowly. Another bubble escaped toward the surface. Time was running out. She looked toward the distant village. Tiny chimneys stood far beyond the trees. Help would never arrive in time. Even if she ran. Even if every man followed her back. The creature beneath the ice would already be gone. Her fingers tightened around the wooden handle of the small woodsman's axe hanging from her belt. The sensible choice was obvious. Leave. Forget what she had seen. No one would blame her. No one would even know. She was only one woman. The wolf was impossibly large. The lake was dangerously frozen. Saving it bordered on madness. The ice cracked. A thin line spread beneath her knees. She froze. The wolf's ears lifted slightly. Another crack echoed beneath the surface. Wind swept across the lake, carrying loose snow in silver waves around them. Ilara slowly rose. For one painful heartbeat, it seemed she had chosen to leave. Instead, she pulled the axe free. The worn wooden handle settled firmly into her frozen hands. Her fear remained. It simply no longer decided what she would do. She took a deep breath that burned like ice in her lungs, stepped toward the trapped wolf, and lifted the axe above her head. Then, with every ounce of strength she possessed, she swung. The blade struck the ice with a sharp crack that echoed across the frozen lake. The sound rolled through the valley, bounced against the snow-covered cliffs, and disappeared into the endless forest beyond. A web of fractures spread beneath Ilara's boots. For one terrifying heartbeat, she thought the entire lake would collapse beneath her. She stumbled backward, breathing hard, waiting for the ice to give way. It held. Only barely. She looked down again. The wolf had not moved. Its silver eyes remained fixed upon her, calm despite the water stealing the last of its strength. "Hold on," she whispered, though she doubted the great creature could understand her. "Please, just hold on." She raised the axe once more. Again the blade came down. Another crack. Another shower of frozen shards. Each strike stole the feeling from her arms, but the opening slowly widened. Dark water rushed upward, splashing over the ice. It soaked through her boots in an instant. The cold felt like knives driving into her feet. She ignored it. She swung again. 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 Her shoulders burned. Her palms split open beneath the rough wooden handle. The clean white snow around her slowly turned pink where drops of blood slipped from her fingers. The wolf watched in silence. Not once did it growl. Not once did it struggle against its prison. Almost as if it understood that every movement could destroy the fragile ice beneath them both. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The hole was finally large enough for Elara to see the enormous slab of frozen rock pinning the wolf's foreleg beneath the water. She dropped the axe beside her and lay flat against the ice. The freezing water reached almost to her shoulders as she stretched one trembling arm into the opening. The cold stole her breath instantly. Pain raced through every finger. She could barely feel the stone beneath the surface. It would never move by hand. She pulled herself back onto the ice, gasping. Her eyes searched desperately across the shoreline. Near a fallen pine rested a coil of old rope left behind by fishermen before winter sealed the lake. She ran. Snow flew beneath her boots. She grabbed the rope and hurried back before fear had another chance to speak. Working quickly, she tied one end around the broken slab beneath the water. The other she wrapped around the thick trunk of a frost-covered birch standing near the lake's edge. It was a foolish plan. The rope was old. The knot uncertain. The stone impossibly heavy. But it was all she had. Elara leaned backward with every ounce of strength her slender body possessed. The rope stretched. The tree groaned. Nothing happened. She pulled harder. Her boots slipped across the ice. Again. Again. Then. A dull grinding sound rose from beneath the lake. The slab shifted. Only an inch. But it moved. Hope flared inside her chest. She planted both feet. Tightened her grip until the rope cut into her bleeding palms. And pulled once more. The frozen rock slid aside with a deep rumble. At that exact moment the wolf kicked free. Its powerful body surged upward through the opening. The force of its movement shattered the surrounding ice. Water exploded into the air. A wave struck Elara full in the chest. The world disappeared beneath freezing darkness. She sank. Cold wrapped around her like chains. Above her, sunlight shimmered through broken sheets of ice. She reached upward. Her heavy clothes dragged her lower. Her lungs screamed. Then something enormous moved through the water. A powerful shape. Silver. The wolf. Instead of swimming toward freedom, it turned back. Its jaws closed gently around the thick fabric of her cloak. Not her arm. Not her shoulder. The cloak. Carefully. Almost gently. With one tremendous stroke, it pulled both of them toward the shattered edge of the lake. Elara's hands found solid ice. She clawed forward desperately. Snow scraped against her frozen fingers. She collapsed onto the shoreline, coughing water into the silent morning. For several long moments neither of them moved. The wind whispered through the pine trees. Tiny snowflakes settled upon soaked fur and frozen hair alike. At last Elara forced herself onto her knees. The wolf still lay beside the water. Its breathing came slow and uneven. One foreleg trembled violently where the heavy stone had crushed it. Blood stained the silver fur near its shoulder. It had escaped death, only to collapse from exhaustion. Elara looked toward the village far below. No one would believe this. Even if they did. Hunters would come. Fear had always reached people faster than wonder. She removed her thick wool cloak despite the bitter cold. Without hesitation she draped it across the giant wolf's shoulders. The creature lifted its head slightly. Steam rose from its breath. Its silver eyes searched hers. There was no threat inside them. Only quiet understanding. "You need this more than I do," she said softly, forcing a tired smile. The wolf blinked once. Its ears lowered. Slowly. Very slowly. It rested its massive head upon the snow. The gesture carried no command. No dominance. Only trust. Elara opened her nearly empty satchel. Inside remained one small loaf of coarse bread, a wedge of goat cheese, and 2 dried strips of smoked venison she had planned to make last until evening. She looked at the food, then at the wolf. Without another thought, she placed everything before it. "You've earned it." The wolf sniffed the meal. It ate slowly, almost carefully, as though understanding the sacrifice hidden within such a simple offering. By the time the last piece disappeared, daylight had begun fading behind thick winter clouds. The temperature dropped even further. Neither of them could remain beside the lake. Ilara gathered fallen branches beneath nearby pines. Soon a small fire crackled against the growing darkness. Orange light danced across the snow, turning the white world gold for a few precious moments. She warmed her hands above the flames. Across from her, the wolf watched the fire with ancient, thoughtful eyes. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. The forest itself seemed strangely quiet. No ravens called. No fox crossed the clearing. Even the wind softened until only the gentle crackle of burning wood filled the evening. For the first time in many years, Ilara did not feel alone. Night settled over the mountains. Stars slowly appeared between drifting clouds. She leaned against a fallen log, exhausted beyond words. Sleep came without warning. Before her eyes finally closed, she glanced toward the wolf one last time. It was still there, watching the forest, watching the darkness, watching over her. When dawn returned, the fire had burned down to glowing embers. The cold woke Ilara first. She rubbed her eyes and looked toward the place where the wolf had rested. It was gone. Only her folded cloak remained upon the snow. Clean. Dry. As though someone had carefully placed it there during the night. She smiled despite herself. "So, you lived." She wrapped the cloak around her shoulders. Then she noticed something else. Surrounding the place where she had slept. Huge paw prints. Not one trail. Many. They circled her campsite in perfect silence before disappearing into the forest from every direction. Her smile slowly faded. The wolf had not been alone. Others had come during the night. None had touched her. None had stolen her supplies. They had simply stood watch. A strange warmth settled inside her chest. She whispered a quiet thank you to the empty forest before beginning the long walk back toward Ashen Hollow. The village appeared peaceful from a distance. Smoke drifted lazily into the pale morning sky. Children carried bundles of firewood between cottages. Everything looked ordinary. Until she reached the first farmhouse. Old farmer Edric stood frozen beside his fence. His mouth hung open. He pointed toward the hills without speaking. Ilara followed his trembling hand. Along the snowy ridge overlooking the valley stood 3 wolves. Not hunting. Not hiding. Watching. The largest lifted its head toward the sky. A long, haunting howl rolled across the valley. Before the echo faded, another answered from the western forest. Then another from the eastern cliffs. Another from the northern peaks. Within moments, the entire wilderness seemed alive with voices. Villagers rushed from their homes. Doors slammed open. Children clung to frightened parents. Yet something impossible happened. The wolves did not attack. Instead, they turned away from the village together and disappeared into the forest like silent grey shadows, leaving behind only their tracks. And a question no one could answer. Because from that morning onward, wolves began appearing across the kingdom. They walked beside lonely roads. They crossed frozen fields. They rested outside distant villages. But never once did they harm a single innocent soul. Some called it a miracle. Others called it a warning. Far away, beyond the snow-covered mountains, word of the strange change reached the stone walls of the royal capital. And when the commander of the king's hunters heard that the wolves had abandoned their fear of humans, he smiled. Not with wonder, but with ambition. The royal capital stood nearly 200 miles south of Ashen Hollow, where winter still ruled, though with less cruelty than it did among the northern peaks. High stone walls circled the city like an iron crown. Colorful banners hung from watchtowers, snapping sharply in the cold wind, while merchants shouted through crowded streets where people hurried beneath thick wool cloaks. Smoke rose from hundreds of chimneys, filling the air with the smell of burning oak and fresh bread. At the heart of the city stood Blackstone Keep. Its towers climbed toward the grey sky like giant spears. Within its cold halls walked a man who had spent his entire life believing that fear was stronger than kindness. Lord Garrick, commander of the king's hunters. His armor gleamed like polished steel, but there was nothing warm behind the sharp blue eyes that studied the kingdom's map spread across a massive oak table. Scars crossed one side of his face, gifts from battles long past. People whispered that he had never smiled unless someone else had suffered first. A messenger knelt before him. "My lord, reports continue arriving from the northern villages." Garrick did not look up. "More attacks?" The messenger hesitated. "No, my lord." That answer finally drew Garrick's attention. "No attacks?" "No, sir." The young soldier swallowed. "The wolves simply appear." Garrick's expression hardened. "They watch travelers. They sleep near farms. They even walk through villages. But they never harm anyone." Silence filled the chamber. One of Garrick's captains shifted uneasily. "My lord, perhaps the stories are true." Garrick slowly turned. "What stories?" "The old prophecy." The captain immediately regretted speaking. "They say the wolves only gather when the ancient bond begins to awaken." The room fell silent again. Then Garrick laughed. It was not a joyful sound. It was cold, sharp, almost mocking. "Legends are chains forged for weak minds." He rolled up the kingdom's map and slammed it onto the table. "Wolves do not suddenly become peaceful. They obey someone." His finger pressed against the northern frontier. "Find whoever commands them. And when you do..." His eyes became colder still. "Make an example." Far to the north, Ashen Hollow knew nothing of Garrick's orders. Life tried to return to normal. People chopped wood. Children chased one another through fresh snow. Women hung blankets outside to catch the weak winter sunlight. But ordinary life no longer felt ordinary. Every few days another wolf appeared. Sometimes only one. Sometimes several together. They watched from distant hills. Never approaching. Never threatening. One afternoon, while carrying herbs home from the forest, Ilara noticed fresh tracks weaving between the trees. They were enormous. Far larger than any wolf she had ever seen before that day on the lake. She followed them only a short distance before entering a quiet clearing where sunlight spilled through snow-covered branches. There, standing upon a fallen log, was the silver wolf. Its coat shimmered beneath scattered beams of light. The wound on its shoulder had begun to heal. Though the crushed foreleg still carried a slight limp, the great animal stood proudly, its powerful chest rising slowly with each calm breath. For a long moment neither moved. The forest seemed to hold its breath with them. Ilara smiled. "I wondered if I'd see you again." The wolf tilted its head. Its ears twitched at the sound of her voice. She took one careful step forward. Then stopped. "I won't come any closer. I know wild things deserve their space." The wolf studied her. Snow drifted silently between them. Finally, it climbed down from the fallen log. Not quickly. Not cautiously. Simply, calmly. It crossed the clearing until only a few steps separated them. Ilara's heartbeat echoed inside her ears. The wolf lowered its great head. Its silver nose brushed gently against the back of her hand. Warm breath drifted across her frozen fingers. A quiet laugh escaped her lips. "So, you remember." The wolf closed its eyes for just a moment. Then, almost ceremoniously, it stepped aside. As if inviting her to follow. Ilara looked deeper into the forest. "What is it?" The wolf began walking. After several paces it stopped. Looked back. Waited. Curiosity quietly overcame hesitation. She followed. The forest grew older with every step. Towering pines gave way to ancient fir trees whose trunks were so wide that 3 people together could not have wrapped their arms around them. The air smelled different here. Cleaner. Colder. Almost untouched by time. Strange carvings appeared upon weathered stones buried beneath drifting snow. Circles. Stars. The shapes of wolves running beneath a full moon. Ilara paused beside one moss-covered pillar. The carving showed a man standing beside an enormous wolf. Not riding it. Not controlling it. Standing beside it as an equal. She reached out to brush away more snow. The wolf gave a soft huff. Almost impatiently. "You want me to keep going?" It turned once more. The journey continued. Soon the sound of running water reached her ears. A narrow stream flowed through the frozen forest, its center still moving beneath thin sheets of ice. The silver wolf stopped beside it. Lowering its head, it drank slowly. Ilara knelt nearby to refill her flask. When she looked into the clear water, she froze. Beside her own reflection, another face appeared. Not in the forest. Not behind her. Inside the water itself. An old man. Long white hair. Kind eyes. He wore a crown unlike any she had seen in the kingdom. It was woven from silver branches rather than gold. She spun around. No one stood there. The forest remained empty. When she looked back into the stream, only her reflection remained. The wolf was watching her. Almost knowingly. A chill traveled through her spine. What was that? The animal offered no answer. Only silence. That night sleep refused to come easily. The wind sighed outside her little cottage while the fire burned low inside the hearth. Eventually exhaustion pulled her into dreams. She stood alone upon a mountain unlike any she had ever climbed. Thousands of wolves surrounded her. None made a sound. Ahead stood a great throne carved from white stone. It was empty. Above it hung a broken crown. One half rested upon the throne. The other lay buried beneath snow stained dark with ancient blood. A deep voice echoed across the mountain. Not loud. Yet it seemed to come from everywhere at once. A promise forgotten is never truly gone. Snow began falling. The wolves slowly lowered their heads. One by one. As though honoring someone unseen. The voice returned. When mercy breaks the ice. The wind grew stronger. The broken crown trembled. The kingdom shall remember. Ilara reached toward the throne. The mountain vanished. She awoke with a sharp breath. Moonlight poured through her window. Her heart pounded against her ribs. The fire had almost gone out. Outside. A wolf howled. Not far away. She wrapped herself in a blanket and looked through the frosted glass. Standing beside the edge of the forest. The silver wolf watched her cottage. It remained there until sunrise. Days later, fear finally arrived. Not from the wolves. From men. The sound of horses echoed through Ashen Hollow before noon. Villagers stepped outside as nearly 30 mounted hunters rode into the square beneath black banners marked with the royal crest. Their armor shone beneath the pale winter sun. Children hurried behind their parents. Doors closed. Windows latched. At their head rode Captain Rowan, one of Garrick's most loyal officers. Unlike his commander, Rowan's face showed no cruelty. Only duty. He dismounted and addressed the crowd. By order of Lord Garrick. His voice carried across the silent village. Every unusual wolf within these lands is to be reported immediately. No one answered. The captain continued. Anyone found hiding or aiding such creatures will be charged with treason against the crown. Whispers spread through the crowd. Old Brenna gripped her walking stick. The wolves haven't harmed anyone. Rowan looked toward her. That changes nothing. They're cursed. A young shepherd stepped forward. They saved my flock from bandits. Another villager nodded. They've chased away bears. They've guarded travelers. They're not monsters. Rowan's jaw tightened. My orders remain. His soldiers began searching barns, storehouses, stables, even homes. Ilara stood quietly near the back of the crowd. Her pulse quickened. If they found the silver wolf, she didn't dare imagine what would happen. As though sensing her fear, a sharp cry echoed from the forest. Everyone turned. A young wolf burst from the trees. An arrow protruded from its side. It stumbled through the snow, desperate and bleeding. Behind it came 3 royal hunters with bows already drawn. There, one shouted. The wounded animal collapsed only a few yards from the village square. Without thinking, Ilara ran. She threw herself between the wolf and the hunters just as another arrow was released. It struck the frozen ground inches from her shoulder. Gasps erupted from every direction. "What are you doing?" Rowan shouted. Ilara spread her arms. "Stop. Move aside. It hasn't hurt anyone. It doesn't matter." The hunters reached for another arrow. Then, the forest fell silent. Every bird stopped singing. Even the wind seemed to disappear. From between the snow-covered pines, a massive silver figure emerged. The guardian wolf. Its enormous paws pressed quietly into the fresh snow as it walked toward the square. One by one, more wolves stepped from the trees behind it. Gray, black, white, old, young. Dozens. Not snarling. Not charging. Simply standing. Watching. The silver wolf stopped beside Ilara. Without taking its eyes from the hunters, it lowered its great head until it rested gently against her shoulder. The entire village stood frozen. For in that single breathtaking moment, every soul present understood the impossible truth. The wolves had not chosen the forest. They had chosen her. And somewhere beyond the mountains, as if awakened by an invisible thread woven through ancient time, something far older than either kingdoms or kings had finally begun to stir. No one moved. The village square seemed to exist outside of time itself. Snow drifted lazily between the wolves and the royal hunters, settling upon helmets, cloaks, and silver fur alike. A child began to cry somewhere behind the crowd before his mother gently pulled him into her arms. Even the horses stamped nervously, their ears pressed flat against their heads. The wounded young wolf lay at Ilara's feet, its sides rising and falling in short, painful breaths. The guardian stood beside her like a silent mountain. Captain Rowan slowly raised one hand. "Lower your bows." The hunters looked at one another. "My captain." I said lower them. One after another, the bowstrings relaxed. No one dared fire another arrow. The great silver wolf had not growled. It had not bared its teeth. Yet something inside every man present warned that violence would awaken a force none of them could hope to survive. Rowan's eyes remained fixed upon Ilara. "You know this creature." She hesitated. "I found him." A murmur spread through the villagers. "You found him?" "Beneath Mirror Lake." Silence followed. The captain studied her face, searching for deception. Instead, he found only exhaustion and quiet honesty. "You expect me to believe that a beast like this allowed you to live?" Ilara slowly reached down and rested one trembling hand upon the guardian's neck. The wolf remained perfectly still. "He didn't allow it." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "He trusted me." The words hung in the frozen air. Several hunters instinctively stepped backward. Captain Rowan had spent 20 years tracking wolves through mountain passes and dark forests. He had seen starving packs, cornered alphas, mothers protecting their young. Never, not once, had he witnessed a wolf willingly lower its guard before a human. His certainty cracked. Only slightly, but enough. "We're leaving." One of his officers stared at him. "My captain. We've seen enough." "But Lord Gerrick ordered." "I know what Lord Gerrick ordered." He climbed back into his saddle. "And I also know when a battlefield belongs to someone else." Before riding away, Rowan looked once more toward Ilara. "Be careful." She frowned. "Why?" His answer came quietly. "Because when Lord Gerrick learns about this..." He glanced toward the guardian wolf. "He won't send hunters." Without another word, the royal patrol disappeared into the snow-covered road leading south. The wolves remained until the sound of hooves faded completely. Only then did the guardian gently nudge the wounded young wolf. Several wolves stepped forward, surrounding the injured animal with surprising tenderness before guiding it back toward the forest. Within moments, they were gone. The clearing stood empty once again. Yet nothing in Ashen Hollow would ever be ordinary after that day. 3 mornings later, strangers arrived. Not soldiers. Not merchants. Elders. They wore long grey cloaks stitched with faded symbols of wolves, stars, and ancient trees. Their staffs were carved from pale mountain ash, polished smooth by decades of travel. Snow clung to their boots, and deep lines marked faces that had watched many winters come and go. The oldest among them introduced himself simply. "My name is Aldrin." The village welcomed them into the meeting hall, where a fire burned warmly against the bitter afternoon cold. The elder looked toward Ilara. "So?" His weathered eyes carried quiet wonder. The forest finally chose again. She blinked. "I don't understand." "No." A gentle smile crossed his face. "I suppose you wouldn't." He reached into a worn leather satchel and carefully removed a small bundle wrapped in faded cloth. Inside rested a carved stone no larger than her palm. Upon its surface, a wolf, a woman, standing side by side beneath a crown shaped like intertwined branches. "This carving is older than the kingdom itself." Ilara carefully traced its worn edges. "My grandmother told me stories about something like this." Most grandmothers did. Aldrin nodded. But stories become whispers. And whispers become forgotten. The old man's gaze drifted toward the mountains visible through the frosted window. There was a time when kings ruled with the wolves instead of above them. The forests flourished. The rivers remained pure. The people feared winter. But never one another. What happened? A shadow crossed his face. Betrayal. Only that single word. Yet it seemed heavy enough to silence the room. The rightful king disappeared. The bond was broken. The wolves vanished. And men who hungered for power rewrote history. The elder looked back at Ilara. But legends also tell us something else. When a heart untouched by greed saves the last guardian, the forgotten road will open once more. Ilara slowly looked toward the forest. The silver wolf. Aldrin inclined his head. If the stories are true, he has been waiting longer than any living soul. That night sleep refused to stay. The fire crackled softly inside Ilara's cottage while moonlight slipped through tiny gaps between the shutters. Outside, a familiar howl echoed across the valley. Not loud, not urgent. Calling. She wrapped herself in her cloak and stepped into the cold. The guardian stood waiting beyond the last cottage. Its silver coat glowed beneath the full moon. Without hesitation, it turned toward the northern wilderness. Ilara followed. The journey carried them farther than she had ever traveled before. The familiar paths disappeared behind them. Snow deepened. The air grew thinner. Towering cliffs rose on both sides until the forest narrowed into a silent pass where ancient pines leaned overhead like cathedral pillars. Hours passed. Neither spoke. Only the crunch of boots and soft wolf paws disturbed the silence. As dawn approached, they reached the base of the Frost-Crown Mountains. Ilara stopped. She had never imagined anything so beautiful. Great white peaks pierced the clouds, their icy faces glowing pink beneath the first light of morning. Frozen waterfalls hung like crystal curtains from dark cliffs. Eagles circled high above while ribbons of mist drifted between valleys untouched by human footsteps. The guardian continued climbing. She followed. The path became steeper, narrower, more dangerous. Eventually they reached a stone arch nearly buried beneath centuries of snow. Strange runes covered every surface. Although worn by wind and ice, they shimmered faintly as the guardian approached. The wolf placed one enormous paw upon the frozen stone. A deep rumble answered. Snow slid gently from the archway. The ancient gate slowly opened. A breath of surprisingly warm air drifted from within. Ilara stared in disbelief. Hidden behind the mountain lay an entire valley. It was unlike any place she had ever seen. Towering evergreen trees remained green despite the endless winter outside. Clear streams flowed freely without freezing. Wildflowers bloomed beside patches of untouched snow. Dozens, no, hundreds of wolves moved peacefully through the valley. Grey wolves, white wolves, black wolves, pups chasing one another through soft grass. Old wolves resting beneath ancient trees. None showed fear. None showed aggression. As the guardian stepped inside, every wolf stopped. Heads slowly turned. Then something extraordinary happened. One after another, the wolves lowered themselves. Not to the guardian. To Elara. A quiet gasp escaped her lips. I don't understand. The guardian looked toward the heart of the valley. There, standing upon a hill surrounded by weathered stone pillars, rose the ruins of an ancient temple. Its broken towers reached toward the sky like forgotten prayers. Vines climbed across cracked walls. Snow rested upon shattered statues whose faces had long since disappeared beneath time. The wolf began climbing toward it. Inside the ruined sanctuary, sunlight poured through a collapsed roof, illuminating faded murals that still clung stubbornly to the stone walls. Elara stepped closer. Her breath caught. The paintings showed humans and wolves hunting together, protecting villages together, standing before cheering crowds together. One image showed a king placing his hand upon the head of a giant silver wolf while people celebrated beneath fluttering banners. Another showed that same king falling beneath the blades of armored men. The murals beyond had been deliberately destroyed. Faces scratched away. Names erased. History silenced. Only grief remained. At the center of the temple rested a circular stone platform. Upon it lay a crown unlike any crafted by royal goldsmiths. Silver branches intertwined with white crystal. Though centuries had passed, it still shone. The guardian approached the platform. Slowly, it lowered its head. The ground beneath Elara's feet began to tremble. A cold wind spiraled through the ruined temple, though every doorway remained still. Light spread across the faded carvings. Voices, soft, distant, almost like whispers carried across hundreds of years. They filled the sanctuary, not speaking to her ears, but to her heart. Fragments of forgotten memories flowed through her mind. A king standing beside wolves beneath golden autumn leaves. Children laughing as wolf pups played beside them. Harvest festivals where humans and wolves celebrated together without fear. Then, fire, smoke, screams, steel flashing in darkness, blood staining white stone, a crown falling, a silver wolf howling beneath a sky black with ash. Elara staggered backward, tears streaming down her cheeks before she even realized she was crying. The guardian remained beside the ancient crown. Its silver eyes reflected endless sorrow, as though it had carried those memories alone through countless winters. She slowly stepped forward. With trembling fingers, she rested her hand gently against its neck. "You've been waiting all this time." The wolf closed its eyes. For the first time since they had met, she felt its loneliness. Not through words, not through magic, but through a silence so deep it broke her heart. Outside the temple, every wolf in the hidden valley lifted its head toward the bright morning sky. Their voices rose together in one long, haunting chorus that echoed from mountain to mountain. Far below, beyond forests and frozen rivers, Lord Garrick heard the reports arriving one after another. A hidden valley, an ancient temple, a girl walking among wolves. His eyes narrowed. He crushed the parchment inside his armored fist. "So." His voice was little more than a growl. "The old kingdom truly exists." A slow smile spread across his face. "Prepare every available soldier." He turned toward the great map hanging across the chamber wall. This time, he pressed a dagger into the Frost-Crown Mountains. "We bury the past forever." The first snowfall of the new moon drifted silently across the hidden valley. From the temple steps, Elara watched white flakes settle upon ancient stones that had not welcomed human footsteps for generations. The wolves moved peacefully between towering evergreens, their paws leaving delicate trails across untouched snow before the wind gently erased them once more. The valley felt alive, not because of magic alone, but because it remembered. Streams sang beneath thin sheets of ice. Eagles circled high above the mountain peaks. The scent of pine, fresh earth, and wood smoke lingered in the crisp morning air. It was a place untouched by greed, where every tree seemed to guard a story older than the kingdom itself. For the first time since losing her parents, Elara felt something she had almost forgotten. She belonged somewhere. The guardian wolf rested beside the ruined temple, its injured foreleg steadily growing stronger with each passing day. Although the limp remained, it no longer carried the weight of helplessness she had seen beneath the frozen lake. Each sunrise began the same way. The wolves gathered near the ancient platform. Not in worship. In remembrance. The oldest among them sat in a quiet circle while younger wolves listened with lowered heads, as though ancient lessons were being passed down without a single spoken word. Ilara often sat nearby. She never interrupted. She simply watched. Sometimes the guardian looked toward her, and although no words passed between them, she understood more with each silent morning. Trust did not need language. It only needed time. Several days later, Elder Aldrin climbed into the valley with surprising strength for a man whose beard had turned completely white. He carried an old leather bundle beneath one arm. "I hoped I would find you here." Ilara smiled warmly. "I was beginning to think no one else knew this place existed." "Very few do." The elder looked across the valley with misty eyes. "And perhaps that is why it survived." He slowly unfolded the bundle. Inside rested several brittle pages stitched together with faded thread. The parchment had darkened with age. The ink had nearly disappeared. Yet beautiful drawings still remained. Kings, wolves, mountains, and a great hall crowned by silver banners. My teacher protected these all his life. Aldrin carefully turned another page. This is the chronicle of the First Covenant. Ilara leaned closer. The stories are true. They're only half remembered. The elder nodded. The truth is even more beautiful. His finger rested upon a faded illustration. Long ago, before kingdoms built towering castles, people survived only because wolves guided them through impossible winters. They showed hunters where the great herds traveled. They warned villages before avalanches thundered from the mountains. They guarded children lost beneath snowstorms. In return, humans protected the forests. Neither ruled the other. They simply lived together. What destroyed it? Aldrin's gentle expression darkened. Ambition. The same poison that has destroyed many kingdoms. He turned to the final surviving page. A painting showed armed nobles surrounding a king dressed not in gold, but in simple silver robes. Behind him stood the very guardian wolf resting only a few yards away. The rightful king refused to strip the mountains for wealth. He believed forests belonged to future generations. So his closest allies murdered him. The wolves tried to protect him. They failed. Ilara quietly closed the ancient book. So the guardian has carried this burden alone. For nearly 3 centuries. Aldrin slowly nodded. And now? He looked directly into her eyes. He believes that burden no longer belongs to him alone. Far beyond the mountains, the sound of marching boots echoed across frozen roads. Thousands of soldiers advanced beneath black banners. Long lines of wagons carried food, weapons, and heavy siege equipment toward the northern frontier. Villagers stepped aside as the army passed. No songs were sung. No cheers followed. Only silence. Captain Rowan rode near the front beside Lord Garrick. His thoughts remained with Ashen Hollow. With the silver wolf. With the young woman who had stood unarmed before drawn bows. Finally he spoke. "My lord." Garrick did not look at him. "What?" "The villagers truly believe the wolves are protecting them." "They're fools." "What if they're right?" The commander slowly turned in his saddle. His eyes held neither doubt nor compassion. "Tell me, Rowan. What becomes of a kingdom when people begin trusting beasts more than their king?" Rowan offered no answer. They stop fearing the throne. Garrick faced forward again. And a throne without fear never stands for long. Days later, scouts hiding among the lower ridges spotted smoke rising from dozens of military campfires. The army had arrived. One young wolf sprinted through the hidden valley, stopping before the guardian with desperate urgency. The great silver wolf immediately climbed the temple hill. Every wolf followed. Ilara hurried after them. From the highest cliff, she could see them. Hundreds. Then thousands. Tiny figures moving through the snow like dark rivers flowing toward the mountains. Steel helmets flashed beneath the pale winter sun. Long columns of soldiers disappeared into distant forests. The sight stole her breath. They're bringing an army. Elder Aldrin stood quietly beside her. They're bringing fear. The Guardian watched the approaching force without moving. Its ears remained forward. Its breathing calm. It did not look like an animal preparing for war. It looked like a guardian preparing for one final duty. That evening the valley gathered beneath the ancient temple. No fires burned. The moon provided enough light. The wolves formed a wide circle around Ilara. One by one, they lowered themselves onto the snow. Waiting. The guardian slowly approached. It carried something gently between its jaws. The silver crown. It placed the ancient relic upon the stone platform before her. Moonlight danced across its crystal branches. For a long moment neither moved. Then the guardian gently nudged the crown toward Ilara. She stepped backward. No. Her voice trembled. I can't. The wolf remained still. This doesn't belong to me. Tears gathered in her eyes. I'm only a village girl. I don't know how to lead anyone. The guardian slowly lowered its head. Its silver eyes never left hers. Elder Aldrin smiled softly. It is not asking you to become a queen. She looked at him. It is asking whether you will protect what others abandoned. Ilara looked around the circle. Every wolf watched quietly. Not demanding. Not expecting. Simply hoping. She slowly knelt before the ancient crown. Instead of placing it upon her own head, she lifted it carefully with both hands. Then she carried it to the guardian. With gentle fingers, she rested it upon the stone beside him. It belongs with the one who never stopped protecting this place. The valley became perfectly still. Then something extraordinary happened. A warm breeze swept through the frozen sanctuary. Snowflakes lifted into the air instead of falling. The ancient trees rustled though no storm had come. The crystals woven into the crown began glowing with soft silver light. The guardian stepped forward. Instead of taking the crown, it gently touched Ilara's forehead with its nose. A brilliant light burst outward. It rolled across the valley like sunlight after endless winter. Every wolf lifted its head toward the sky. Their voices joined together in one powerful, echoing chorus. Far below the mountains, every wolf throughout the kingdom answered. The sound carried across forests, rivers, villages, and frozen plains. People stopped working. Children looked toward distant hills. Old men quietly removed their hats. No one understood why. Only that something ancient had awakened. Lord Garrick heard the howls before dawn. Standing outside his command tent, he watched thousands of birds suddenly rise from the forest in frightened clouds. His generals gathered behind him. The wolves know we're here. They always knew. Garrick tightened his leather gloves. Tomorrow we climb. One nervous officer cleared his throat. The passes are narrow. We'll lose men. We have enough men to lose. No one argued. Before sunrise, Captain Rowan wandered away from the sleeping camp. He climbed a rocky ridge overlooking the valley below. There, sitting alone beneath a frost-covered pine, he found an old shepherd quietly watching the mountains. The man looked familiar. It was the shepherd from Ashen Hollow whose flock had once been protected by wolves. You should leave, Rowan said. The army moves at dawn. The old shepherd smiled sadly. I know. Then why are you still here? He looked toward the distant peaks. When I was a boy. My grandfather told me something. Rowan remained silent. He said there are two kinds of victories. The first leaves your enemy buried. The second leaves your children proud. The shepherd slowly stood. I'm too old to stop your commander. But perhaps. He looked directly into Rowan's eyes. You still can. With those words, he quietly disappeared into the snowy forest. Rowan remained standing long after the old man was gone. The mountain wind tugged gently at his cloak. For the first time in many years, the weight of his sword felt heavier than his conscience. Morning arrived beneath thick grey clouds. The royal army began climbing the narrow mountain pass. Boots crushed fresh snow. Armor clinked softly. Long banners disappeared into drifting mist. High above, hidden among towering cliffs, hundreds of wolves watched in complete silence. The Guardian stood at the front beside Ilara. She could see the army winding slowly upward like a dark scar across the white mountains. Fear tightened inside her chest. Not for herself. For everyone. For the wolves. For the villages below. For a kingdom standing upon the edge of repeating its darkest mistake. She gently rested one hand against the Guardian's thick silver fur. We cannot let history happen again. The wolf looked toward her. Its calm silver eyes reflected not fear, but faith. Then, from somewhere below, a great war horn echoed through the mountains. Its deep cry rolled across every cliff. The invasion had begun. The mournful cry of the war horn echoed through the frost-crowned mountains, rolling from cliff to cliff until even the oldest pines seemed to shudder beneath its weight. Then, silence. Not the peaceful silence of falling snow. The heavy silence that comes just before the world changes forever. Ilara stood beside the Guardian on the highest ridge overlooking the narrow mountain pass. Below, thousands of armored soldiers climbed steadily through the twisting trail. Their polished helmets flashed beneath the pale winter sun, forming a river of steel cutting through the white wilderness. The wolves did not move. Hundreds of silver, grey, black, and white figures stood among the rocks and trees, their breath rising in quiet clouds. No snarling. No pacing. Only watchful patience. Captain Rowan rode near the front of the army. The deeper they climbed, the more uneasy his horse became. Its ears flicked nervously toward the silent ridges above. His men noticed it too. "My captain." A young soldier pointed toward the cliffs. "They're watching us." Rowan followed his finger. Dozens of wolves stood upon the rocks. Perfectly still. One blinked. Another slowly turned its head. Not one took a threatening step. It felt less like entering enemy territory, and more like walking into a sacred place where they did not belong. Behind them, Lord Garrick urged his black stallion forward. "Keep moving." "My lord," one general warned, "the path narrows ahead." "Good." Garrick's eyes remained fixed on the distant temple barely visible above the clouds. "That means they cannot escape." At the summit, Elder Aldrin rested both hands upon his weathered staff. "They're almost here." Ilara swallowed. "There are too many." The old man nodded. "Yes. We cannot fight them." The Guardian turned toward her. His silver eyes held the same quiet certainty she had seen beneath the frozen lake. Not once had he chosen violence first. Perhaps. Neither should she. She looked across the valley. Children's laughter echoed in her memory. Old Brenna smiling beside her fireplace. The shepherd whose flock had been saved. The wounded young wolf she had protected. Every act of kindness had brought another. Every choice made with compassion had spread farther than she had ever imagined. Maybe this battle could be won the same way. The first soldiers emerged from the mountain pass. They stopped immediately. Before them stretched the hidden valley in all its impossible beauty. Green trees standing untouched by winter. Crystal streams winding through flowering meadows. Ancient stone ruins glowing softly beneath the morning light. Even hardened soldiers lowered their weapons. Several removed their helmets in disbelief. "It's beautiful," someone whispered. Lord Garrick rode past them. His face showed no wonder. Only calculation. "So?" He smiled coldly. "This is what they hid." His gaze swept across the valley. Timber. Fresh water. Rich land. Ancient treasures. He saw wealth. Nothing more. There will be no forest left by spring. Several officers exchanged uneasy glances. "My lord." "The king ordered us to investigate. Not destroy." Garrick's stare silenced him instantly. "The king gave me command." "That is enough." He drew his sword. Its polished blade reflected the pale sky. "Advance." No one moved. Not the soldiers. Not the wolves. The valley itself seemed to refuse the order. Then, The guardian stepped forward. Alone. He descended the temple stairs one careful step at a time until he stood in the open meadow separating both sides. Snowflakes drifted lazily around him. He lowered his head. Not in surrender. In peace. Lord Garrick laughed. So this is your legendary guardian. He raised his sword. A beast pretending to be noble. Ilara's heart pounded. No. She whispered. Please. The guardian remained still. Garrick urged his horse forward. Steel glinted. The distance between them disappeared. Captain Rowan suddenly understood. My lord. He spurred his horse ahead. Stop. But Garrick ignored him. He lifted his sword high. Years of hatred. Years of ambition. Years of fear. All gathered into a single strike. The blade came down. Before it reached the guardian, someone stepped between them. Ilara. The sword stopped inches from her shoulder. Gasps spread through the army. The wolves remained silent. Even the wind seemed to disappear. Garrick stared at her. Move. She slowly shook her head. If you wish to kill him. Her voice trembled. You must first kill me. You would die for an animal. She looked toward the guardian. Then back into Garrick's eyes. He nearly died saving me. I simply returned the kindness. No. Garrick sneered. You've been bewitched. Ilara answered softly. No. I remembered something you forgot. His brow tightened. What? Mercy. Those standing closest would later swear the valley itself seemed to breathe. A warm wind swept gently across the meadow. The ancient temple behind Ilara shimmered beneath sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. The silver crown resting upon the stone platform began glowing. Not brightly. Quietly. Like the first star appearing at dusk. Every wolf lowered its head. The guardian did the same. Then, the earth trembled. Not violently. Gently. As though something buried beneath centuries had finally awakened. A section of the ruined temple floor slowly opened. Stone scraped against stone. Dust rose into the air. Hidden beneath the sanctuary lay a vast chamber untouched by time. Captain Rowan dismounted first. Without waiting for orders, he walked toward it. Inside rested dozens of carved stone tablets. Ancient banners. Royal seals. Books protected inside crystal cases. History. Preserved. Untouched. Elder Aldrin carefully lifted the nearest tablet. His voice echoed through the valley. Here lies the oath of King Alaric. He continued reading. Guardian of the First Covenant. Another elder opened an ancient scroll. The royal seal remained perfectly intact. The names matched. Dates matched. Every record told the same story. Not of rebellion. Not of monsters. Of betrayal. The rightful king had never abandoned his people. He had been murdered. His closest advisors had forged lies to seize the throne. Generation after generation. Those lies became history. Captain Rowan slowly looked toward Lord Garrick. His face had turned pale. My lord. The commander said nothing. Another officer stepped into the chamber. Then another. Each returned carrying more evidence. More records. More truth. One elderly royal historian, who had reluctantly accompanied the army, fell to his knees. Tears filled his eyes. We've been teaching false history. His voice broke. For centuries. Garrick's expression twisted into rage. No. He pointed his sword toward the temple. Burn it. No soldier moved. I gave an order. Still. No one moved. Captain Rowan slowly removed the royal crest from his cloak. He dropped it into the snow. My loyalty was sworn to the kingdom. He looked directly at Garrick. Not to a lie. One after another. Soldiers laid down their swords. Spears. Shields. Helmets. The sound of steel touching stone echoed across the valley. No speeches. No shouting. Only quiet choices. Within moments. Thousands of weapons rested untouched upon the snow. Garrick stood alone. His horse shifted uneasily beneath him. You fools. He whispered. They're animals. The Guardian finally lifted his head. He walked slowly toward Garrick, step by step, until only a few feet separated them. The great wolf looked into the commander's eyes. Not with hatred. Not with revenge. Only sadness. Garrick tried to raise his sword. His hands trembled. For the first time in his life, fear offered him no strength. The sword slipped from his fingers. It struck the frozen ground with a dull metallic sound. No wolf attacked. No one struck him. Instead, Captain Rowan quietly stepped forward. Lord Garrick. His voice remained respectful. In the name of the crown. He placed a hand upon the commander's shoulder. You are under arrest for treason against the kingdom. Garrick looked around desperately. No soldiers came. No banners rose. Only silence answered him. The silence of a lie that had finally run out of time. Weeks later, the royal capital looked very different. The hidden records had been examined by scholars from every province. Every seal had been verified. Every name confirmed. The truth could no longer be hidden. The elderly king, horrified by the crimes committed in his ancestor's name, stood before thousands gathered in the great square. Beside him stood a quiet young man whose family had secretly protected the true royal bloodline for generations. He wanted no revenge. Only justice. The old king removed his own crown. With steady hands, he placed it upon the rightful heir. The crowd remained silent. Then, one voice began cheering. Another joined. Soon the entire city erupted. Not because a new ruler had taken the throne, but because the kingdom had finally found its conscience again. Spring arrived slowly in the north. Snow melted from the branches. Streams laughed once more through the valleys. Tiny green shoots pushed bravely through the thawing earth. Children returned to the forests. This time, they were no longer afraid. Sometimes wolves appeared beside the trails. They watched quietly before disappearing among the trees. Parents no longer reached for weapons. Instead, they smiled. The old covenant had begun again. Ilara returned to Ashen Hollow. Her cottage remained exactly as she had left it. The roof still leaked. The fence still leaned slightly to one side. The birds still gathered each morning waiting for grain. She laughed softly. Some things never needed to change. Many people traveled north hoping to meet the woman whose name had spread across every kingdom. Some offered gold. Others offered land. A few even suggested she live within the royal palace. She thanked each of them kindly, then declined. I already have a home. She preferred repairing broken fences, gathering herbs, helping neighbors carry firewood. Fame had never been the reason she reached beneath the ice. It never would be. One evening, as the sun disappeared behind the frost-crowned mountains, Ilara climbed the hill overlooking Mirror Lake. The ice had long since melted. The water reflected the sky once more, just as it had before winter came. She smiled at the memory. A quiet rustle came from the trees. The Guardian emerged. His scar remained. A reminder, not of weakness, but of survival. He walked to the water's edge beside her. Together they watched the fading light dance across the lake. After a long, peaceful silence, the Guardian gently lowered his head until it rested against her shoulder, just as he had on the day the village first witnessed their bond. Ilara rested one hand upon his silver fur. Neither needed words. Above them, stars slowly awakened across the evening sky. Then, somewhere deep within the northern forest, a single wolf began to howl. Another answered. Then another. Soon the entire wilderness sang beneath the stars. Not as a warning. Not as a cry for war. But as a song of remembrance. A song for a forgotten king. For a kingdom healed by truth. And for one ordinary young woman who had looked beneath the frozen ice, seen a life that others would have abandoned, and chosen compassion over fear. Long after kingdoms changed. Long after crowns passed from one ruler to another. Parents would gather their children beside warm fires on quiet winter nights and tell the same story. They would tell them that courage did not always carry a sword. That greatness did not always sit upon a throne. Sometimes. It began with bleeding hands, a frozen lake, and a single choice to save a stranger. And whenever the wolves howled beneath the northern stars, the people no longer closed their doors in fear. Instead, they listened with grateful hearts. Because they knew the forest was not singing of darkness. It was singing of hope.